Catherine Adam from, there it is. It's just a delayed reaction on the recording. Here we go. So I'm Kat Adam from Denterlein. I'm here with my colleague Jadzia Walker. We're going to be co-presenting tonight, and I will share my screen to pull up a few slides that we will share, and then we look forward to a discussion as well. Just give me one sec. Oops. Great. So yes, thank you everybody for joining us. As I said, Catherine Adam here with my colleague Jadzia Walker. So we are from Denterlein. We are a communications firm located in Boston. We work with all different kinds of industries, but in particular, Jadzia and I focus a lot on working with organizations who care about issues around housing, mobility, and climate. So we're delighted to be here with you. As Cassie was saying, we have a lot of different communities represented here tonight, which is wonderful. I wanted to share this list of the communities we've seen represented as part of the training tonight, and then the one we did last week. And so as you can see, this is a really robust list with just all kinds of different cities and towns. And so wanted to just underscore what Cassie was saying, which is that we come with our advice very humbly, recognizing that the knowledge that you have of your own communities is far more valuable than anything we could share tonight. So fully respect that there are things that you may find valuable and things that you may find are not the right view for your community, and we totally get that. Also, we found that in this training and in our last week training that we have some folks who represent communities where you've been doing organizing work around pro-housing, pro-density kind of work for a long time. Maybe you're part of an organization that already has a really strong social media presence. You talk to the press all the time. And maybe some of you, you're the kind of the first or, on the vanguard of really starting to do this kind of organizing in your community, and you're just starting out. And so we hope that this training is helpful to everyone, and we welcome everyone to be here. We're going to have a discussion at the end, so I wanted to just get these questions in folks' minds to start thinking about, because these will be what we come back to as food for thought. We would love to hear if anyone has an example of how communications has helped your campaign for housing in your community so far. We'd love to hear about any communications challenges that you are already finding in your campaign or that you foresee coming up. And then anything else you would like additional training on. So if that's related to communications, if it's related to anything else, we can be sure we're routing back with abundant housing on that. And if it is communications related, we would be happy to facilitate something else. So you'll see that in this hour, we're kind of doing a general communications overview, but as we're going through, if you would really love us to be like digging into one thing in more detail, we can do that in a follow-up training. So I will kick it over to my colleague Jadzia to share our goals.
Hi all. So through this training tonight, we hope to shed some light on how communications can help how communications can help shape and add to housing-related campaigns, give people insight on best practices to communicate with your communities and other stakeholders about housing in a way that persuades and advances discussion and action. We also plan to inform more on how to take advantage of media and social platforms, as well as in-person opportunities that can go far in helping advance various goals you may have.
And before we talk about all of the hows, we wanted to share a little bit about the whys, because there are so many different approaches that you can take with communications as part of your campaigns. And so thinking about a couple potential objectives for your campaigns can be helpful in determining where you want to spend your time and effort. So here are some objectives that we see as potential options for you. You may have others. The first is that we have found that communications can help democratize the community conversation. And what I mean by that is that in many communities, particularly wealthier communities with long histories of exclusionary policies, the conversation around housing can be dominated by a small group of homeowners who will claim that they speak for the whole community writ large. And so by elevating other voices of people who live in the community or people who would want to live in the community and having a really strong communications campaign, you can create a better democratic public conversation and therefore a better democratic process around housing in your community. So that's something you might think of as an objective for this. Communications can change the narrative around housing. So in many places, we're stuck in this paradigm where anytime a conversation about housing emerges, it tends to focus on all of the risks that come with building anything. So the risks to overburdening schools, the risks to infrastructure, the risks to traffic, the risks of just unknowns. And what we can do with effective messaging is not only help talk about the benefits that come with housing, like the many, many benefits that can come to the community by supporting more housing options for people, but also help folks understand that the risk comes from not doing enough, that the risk comes from inaction. And we're seeing through the housing crisis, this risk playing out in real time all over the state. And then another objective you might think about is that an effective communications campaign can give confidence to public officials to make difficult decisions. So being a public official at the local level means that people come up to you in the grocery store and yell at you. That is a fact. It's a really, really tough job. And again, if you're in a community where you have a small group of folks who have really dominated the public conversation for a long time, it can feel like anything that you want to do around housing, even if it's a completely moderate, reasonable step, can feel like it's a really radical, really unpopular kind of proposal. And so through more effective conversations, through democratizing the conversation, balancing it out, it can help kind of put in perspective the decisions that public officials need to be making and give them more confidence that they can move forward effectively with better housing policy. So those are three objectives we put out there. So as we think about the best ways to talk about housing, going to messaging here, I wanted to first share a quote from Lexington. As many folks may know, Lexington won the Overachiever Award, let's see, last week or 2 weeks ago, when they passed via town meeting their MBTA zoning, more than a year ahead of schedule and at a level higher than even the minimum requirement as part of the law. And the Globe and other outlets wrote a lot of stories around this. And I saw this quote in the Globe from their planning board chair, Bob Peter. So this is just from April 14th. And he said, I just want to read this because I think it's really helpful. He says, folks have realized that there's nowhere in Lexington for their kids to live if they want to move back after college. And we also have residents who have hit retirement age and want to downsize, but can't find anywhere in town to do that. The answer we have in front of us is to build more multifamily housing. We think these changes are going to make our town a better place to live. And I just really love this quote, and I'll back into why I think this is such effective messaging. So as Cassie mentioned, Abundant Housing is working with researchers and public opinion, a public opinion firm to actually do some real data-driven research on the most effective ways to talk about housing. So I don't want to present this messaging tonight as kind of the end all be all, like fully canonized best way to talk about housing forever in all details, because there will be a lot more to come from Abundant Housing on this in the weeks ahead. It's really exciting, but wanted to share tonight just a framework for you to be thinking about really on a 30,000 foot level in terms of how you might approach housing conversations in your community, with more details you can fill in later based on this research that is going to be coming. So the first message that is effective on housing is to underscore that the housing crisis is impacting all of us in this community. And so this message is meant to be very personal, it's very local, and it's about people. So it's saying that the housing crisis is about your neighbor down the street who's elderly, is starting to have trouble getting up and down the stairs of her home, wants to stay in the community, move to somewhere else, can't afford it, doesn't know what she's going to do. It's about the person who takes care of your kid at the local childcare center, who might need to quit her job because she has a 2-hour commute and can't do it anymore, would love to move into the community, but can't afford it. And so it's about those kind of stories much more than it's about the state's, economic competitiveness, or it's about zoning, or it's about units, or about, the numbers here and there. It's really about personal stories, local stories, and the understanding that it's an issue that is impacting the community that you live everywhere. The next message is the idea that more housing brings many benefits. So because of the MBTA communities law, there's a temptation among some to kind of have this attitude of, yes, we need to solve the housing crisis, so we'll build more housing. And it's kind of like, it's the thing we have to do. And what we want to be promoting is that, like, we're building more housing. It's a yes and thing. We're building more housing and it brings a bunch of benefits. It creates a stronger small business community, more walkable neighborhoods, more housing options for everyone. So really thinking about the positive, proactive message, along with the message of how this is responding to something that is a crisis. And along with this, kind of the flip side is that the negative, the risks come from inaction. Getting into the MBTA Communities Law, the message around this is really that the MBTA Communities Law is a reasonable step forward. And so this is meant to underscore that, the MBTA Communities Law came into being under the Baker administration. It's being moved forward by the Healy administration. It's politically popular, it's bipartisan, it's a feasible, rational, reasonable thing that allows every community to have the flexibility to move forward in the way that's the most right for them. And so again, there's going to be this temptation to view this as being a bold kind of radical action that this is happening across the state. But the fact is that it's very reasonable as a response to the crisis that we're facing. So making sure to sort of just continue to talk about the fact that, it moved forward in the Baker administration, is moving forward in the Healy administration. Every municipality has flexibility. And this is kind of the moderate, reasonable thing we need to do next. And then in terms of all housing conversations, making sure to use the MBTA Communities Law as a baseline. And so there's ways that state agencies and others will be helping you with this kind of message. So folks may have seen in the past couple of weeks that Attorney General Andrea Campbell issued an advisory saying that any community that is looking to completely flout the law will be, hearing from their office. And you also have organizations like the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights that is threatening to sue communities that again are just going to completely flout the law. And so I think you'll see more and more continued sort of statewide support for communities needing to move forward in accordance with the law, again, keeping the flexibility of how exactly that happens. And so as you're talking about housing in your community, using that law as a given, as a baseline, and then kind of working from there. And so what that means is that you might find, like Lexington, that you are able to kind of go above and beyond in terms of the amount of space that you are using, you're designating for the zoning district. Or the law might be a baseline in the sense that you're overlaying other kinds of affordability policies on the law. And the law leaves flexibility to do that. So if you're in a community where you want to really highlight the need for additional affordability policy in order to prevent gentrification and ensure various types of housing options, you can absolutely do that as part of the messaging, again, using that law as a baseline. So with all of that in mind, wanted to take one more look at this Lexington quote. So giving this another read, you can see, again, he's speaking very locally. He's talking about people in the community and the challenges that they're facing. It's personal. He's really painting a picture of some of the challenges. You get the sense he's hearing directly that neighbors are kind of talking to each other about. He talks about the benefits. He says it's going to make the town a better place to live, which I just love because it's a yes and kind of thing. Implicitly, he's talking about the risks that come from inaction. And his tone is very reasonable. He's not saying, we in Lexington wanted to take the biggest, boldest, step. Even though, again, they are first and they do go above and beyond the law, but he's saying, we've identified this as a problem. Everybody kind of agrees this is a problem. And this was the reasonable kind of next step we needed to take moving forward. So one thing you'll notice in terms of anti-housing arguments that you will hear is that rarely will they be completely novel. There are, a set of arguments that people use against new housing in communities that you tend to hear again and again and again. And so we don't have time in this presentation to kind of go through all of these one by one, though, again, we could do a very separate, message training where we do some role playing and really, get people familiar with the Q&A. But I just want to sort of flag some of these. And then just reiterate that Abundant Housing is doing research on answers to some of these questions, and we'll be sharing that with you. And that the best thing that everybody can do is just, make sure to to stay tuned and read those materials and then just practice, so that you're never surprised when some of these questions or comments come up in a public meeting, or a reporter asks you, somebody said that this is going to mean that traffic is crazy, and you'll kind of be ready for that, because again, these are the arguments that come up over and over and over again. And at the end of the discussion, we'd love to hear if you have any other ones that you'd like us to keep in mind and be creating some preparatory materials for. So over to Jadzia, we're going to talk now about the different kinds of communications options and channels you might have at your disposal moving forward.
Right. So as far as the different communications opportunities that exist, we wanted to give a broad overview. And we'd also like to note that there's no need to pursue everything that is listed here. In fact, the most helpful thing to do first is understand where the conversations you want to be involved in are happening. Who is your audience, and what is the best way to reach them, get in front of them, etc. And some of these options might also not be available or make sense for the communities you're trying to connect with. So something to keep in mind. So some of these options include community papers and local TV, radio, and something to be aware of is that recently in media and local communities has been shrinking. So local paper may not exist in your community depending. And then as for the larger outlets, such as the Boston Globe, for example, they typically won't cover day-to-day happenings, but if there's a key moment or development in the campaign, that could be worth sharing and getting your message out. And then social media such as Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, etc., are also great at getting in front of community members and other stakeholders. Once again, just a matter of seeing what people are on. For example, different clients that I work with, for some of them, we will have more luck on Twitter and others LinkedIn. It just depends on the audience we're trying to reach. And then other digital forms of communications include updating or directing people to web pages, or sending out email blasts to a list of contacts, listserv, etc., that you have cultivated. And we won't go through that in depth tonight, but we think it's good to be aware of in your communications plan when you build one out. And then in-person communications can also be very instrumental in campaigns. They're an opportunity to share materials with people face-to-face and let people know directly what it is you're trying to achieve and why. These opportunities can present themselves at community meetings, community events, or other sorts of meetings, for example. And then when it comes to interacting with the media and getting your message out, there's a couple ways to go about it. You can pitch a story to a reporter who might regularly address topics related to housing, or maybe they've been working on a story that is related to your particular issue and you want to offer another point of view. You can write a letter to the editor or LTE, which are written in response to something that may be happening in the community, or another piece that might have popped in said publication that you want to respond to. And these are typically on the shorter side, about 200 words. An opinion piece or op-ed is another option, another route you can take, which is written and submitted by, or it can be written and submitted by someone in the organization, such as the head or an individual with similar standing. It can also be very powerful to have an op-ed written by a community member. And these tend to be longer than LTEs, typically between 500 and 700-ish words. You can also contribute to an editorial, which is a piece written by and the opinion of the paper. And this is an opportunity to pitch your point of view, which can then help inform the piece that they end up writing. And all of this, we wanted to say that it's important to remember that reporters work on deadlines and rely on good information. And by being a good liaison, sharing credible facts, in addition to sharing pitches, doing outreach to media in general. This can help heighten your visibility and strengthen your relationship with the media. It can also make it so that in the future, there's a greater chance of a reporter engaging with you directly as an expert on the matter if they happen to be writing on another related topic down the line.
Jadzia, and wanted to show an example of what this literally looks like. So this is the opinion section of the Boston Globe. This is the most robust example you'll see. Kind of as Jadzia was mentioning, media in many local communities has been cut back a lot over the years, and so you may find as you're going through your own local paper that maybe they don't even really have an opinion section. So you'll just need to see kind of what opportunities you have. I will say that with the Boston Globe, they are doing a ton of housing writing these days. So as I mentioned, even with Lexington alone, I was doing a count. I think they wrote like maybe maybe like 2 news stories and 3 editorials on it or something like that. And again, they were first, but don't think that the Boston Globe is not an option for you, because they are doing a lot in a way that's really exciting. So this is the Boston Globe's opinion section. So picture this like you're like looking at the paper, with the on the left and the right. On the left is the editorial, and so the editorial, again, this one is about Lexington. Inspired by state's transit-oriented housing law, Lexington approves zoning reforms. So this is written by the editorial team at the Boston Globe. In smaller papers, it's generally written by the editor, not as opposed to a team. And so this is the stated opinion of the Boston Globe expressing a point of view on behalf of the paper about what Lexington did, why they support it, why they think that other communities should follow Lexington's lead. So then on the right, the piece about Harvard there, this is written by somebody at Harvard, I assume, but it's an outside person who submitted this piece to the Boston Globe to express a point of view. And so this again would be another option for you in terms of, again, 500 to 700 words. Check your local paper, see kind of what their options are. And you would write it like a personal essay, kind of, here's my opinion, here's why I think this, again, whether it's you, whether it's another trusted community member. And then you can see all the way on the right, these are the letters to the editor. The Globe runs a few of them at a time, and these are just much shorter, and they're in reaction to either another piece or to something happening in the community. So you have a whole range of opinion options at your disposal. And so why might you reach out to the media, or what might be some milestones that are worthy for that? So here's a few options that we've just made up, but you might find something similar as you're going through with your campaigns. Maybe secure support from a few community leaders for new zoning plans. So maybe, for example, you've got like 4 or 5 local small businesses on Main Street who come together and have expressed their support for new zoning plans because of what that'll do for their foot traffic. They think it's good for the economic development of your city or town. Maybe what you could do is pair a couple of them and write an op-ed from their opinion, talking about why Main Street supports this, why this is good for business. You could have one of them write a letter to the editor as well. Maybe you have an event coming up that you think a news reporter should know about. So it could be something that you're organizing, or maybe it's something that you're going to, like a public meeting. Either way, you could reach out to a reporter, again, the person who's writing like the straight news stories, and say, hey, this is coming up. We'll be there on behalf of XYZ organization. Here's why we think this is important that you're there. And oh, by the way, if you go and you want to talk to somebody who's very directly being impacted by some of these housing decisions, we'd love to put you in touch with X, Y, or Z. Again, you can kind of be a liaison to that person. Another opportunity might be that new data is released about housing availability. So folks may know that, like, on a quarterly basis, I think it is, statewide, different kind of real estate analysts release data around what the state's housing market looks like in terms of median cost of a single family home, median cost of a condo, the number of sales that happen, the number of things that are on the market, and you can break that down by local community. And so it may be that you keep track of this data as it's coming out, and then you share that with your local media, whether that's a local paper, your local TV station or radio, whatever. Say, hey, in case you haven't seen this, like, this is pretty shocking, but housing inventory in our community is down by 35% over the, the past year. This is creating major impacts for people who are wanting to live in this community, what this is doing for housing prices, what this would then be also be doing for rent costs. So data can sometimes tell a really powerful story, particularly if you pair it with somebody they could talk to share their own story. And this again could be something that you pitch to a news reporter, or this could be a great thing to share with somebody who's an editor who might have the opportunity to write an editorial from the newspaper's perspective, to be like, this is outrageous. We need to be doing something here. And then finally, maybe there's an anti-housing story or an opinion piece and you want to respond. And again, this gets back to this idea of democratizing the conversation. So if you see something that is either factually inaccurate or that you don't agree with, that you feel like is keeping us kind of stuck in the same paradigm, definitely respond. And whether that's you that does it directly, or whether that's, somebody that you've been working with in the community, media loves to see that kind of back and forth. So that's a great option for a letter to the editor. And finally, want to just spend a little bit of time on social media before we move to discussion, because as I was saying before about the cutting back of local media in many communities, you might find that social media is actually the most impactful and important place you can be spending your time from a communications perspective, because that's where a lot of the conversation will be happening, just depending on the media landscape in your own community. Social media is also a place where you can spend a lot of time kind of spinning your wheels. And so it really is a good thing to think about, how can I be strategic using social media while making sure that we are contributing to the conversation in important ways. And so as you're thinking about where to focus, there's a couple things to consider. So one is, where are your key audiences? And we think of your key audiences as potentially people who are potential volunteers for you. So folks who might be allied with your opinion about the need for more housing. So where are they having conversations on social media? Where might you be able to have a call to action to recruit them to do something? Another key audience might be people who are involved in community conversations and sort of civically involved, but haven't really totally made up their mind on housing, but you feel like they're persuadable. So people who are really active in, various community groups, PTA, like people who are active and involved, who will probably be weighing in at some point or have some opinions on housing at some point, but maybe they're just starting to think about it. You might be able to persuade them. And then a third key audience might be elected officials. And this is particularly important if you're living in a place where zoning is going to be decided by city council. But knowing where they are and being there as well is really helpful. And the other helpful thing in terms of where elected officials are hanging out on social media is they tend to kind of have their finger on the pulse of where a lot of important community conversations are happening. So as you're looking at the landscape of social media platforms, you might take a look at, where's your local state rep? Sorry, if somebody could mute, I'm like hearing my own voice in my head. Thanks so much. Seeing where they are and what kind of conversations they're a part of can be really helpful in terms of where you want to spend your time. The other question just to ask yourself is what kinds of content you have to share. So on the next slide, I'll just talk quickly about the different platforms and what kind of content works best on those platforms, because that could be a deciding factor for you. You can use social media to do a few things. So one is to join a conversation. So different social media platforms have things like community groups, pages, just active people who are already having a lot of conversations about housing. So there are probably places where anytime a new development is proposed, there are a lot of people talking about that. And so those kinds of places, if you feel like there are people who are persuadable in those places, those are conversations that you should consider joining so that it is a balanced kind of conversation. You can also start your own conversation by calling people to action. So thinking about how social media might be an entry point for you, again, to be like recruiting volunteers, getting people to sign a petition, getting people to come to a meeting of yours, getting people to speak out at a town meeting. Social media can be that entry point for you to convert people who are allied to start doing more. And then social media can also be a place that you connect with media. So reporters will sometimes use social media as a way to seek out stories and then also to break news. So it can be kind of a bank shot towards the media. In advance of diving into social media, a couple tips. So one is to have a few allies who are ready to kind of jump in with you. So social media, particularly like Facebook, is a place where folks who are opposed to any kind of new housing kind of have a head start in these spaces a lot of times. So if you'll see, like if there's a Facebook post about a new like housing proposal, there'll be a lot of negative comments in a row. Again, not necessarily representative of the full community perspective at all, but just that those are the kinds of folks that have tended to comment on these things for a long time. So if you are getting ready to jump in, having a few other people who are also active on social media, they like it, but maybe they just haven't jumped into these kinds of conversations before, can be helpful so that you're not sort of doing this alone. And then have a ready next step to again, kind of convert people who may agree with you. So if you find that you're having a good kind of engagement on a social media post, again, about either zoning or housing or anything else, being ready to say, hey, anybody who's interested in learning more, we'd welcome you to do X, Y, or Z as a way to have a longer term relationship with the folks that you're engaging with. And the last thing I'll just say about social media is that there are, a multitude of platforms. If I were to say, just painting with like a super broad brush, if you're feeling like you're doing a lot of other stuff, you only want to do one thing, I would say that Facebook continues to be the place where there are a lot of hyper-local community discussions about kind of housing and other community issues. We just find this still to be the case. It's still the most popular platform overall. It's still the most popular platform of people over 25. And these are where a lot of these conversations are happening. Although if people are already doing this kind of organizing work and you have other things to add, please put them in the chat. Again, I'm generalizing a ton here, just to hopefully be helpful. Twitter is a place that is also known as being sort of policy oriented. This can be a good spot if you're organizing around the issue of housing and you want to get networked with other kinds of housing advocates in other parts of the state. Twitter is a place where there's a lot of sort of advocate to advocate conversations, and is also a place that you might find helpful to connect with the media. I think it's less helpful generally as like an on the ground, deep in the community kind of resource compared to conversations that often happen on Facebook. Again, super generalization, put in the chat if that has not been your experience. The other couple things I just wanted to say about Instagram and TikTok, which are two platforms that are super popular as well, is that they are highly visually based. And so if you're thinking about Instagram and TikTok, making sure that you are using them as a place for photos, video, and potentially some infographics. So just think about the kinds of content that you'll be putting out there, because sometimes people find, creating content that's more visually focused can sometimes feel like a bigger lift. And I realize I have an error on my TikTok slide. I meant to fix this. So it's nearly 75% of users are under 34 years old, not over 34 years old. Obviously, it is the Gen Z kind of platform. So as we wrap up the presentation part of this and move to discussion, just wanted to share a couple ways that Abundant Housing and our team can be helpful to you from here. So as I mentioned, Abundant Housing, and as Cassie mentioned, of course, Abundant Housing is going to be sharing a communications toolkit that you'll be able to draw from and tailor for your community, which will include like questions and answers, key messages, et cetera. And this will be based on this really good research and public opinion polling that they're doing. So it'll be very evidence-based. We can host additional communications trainings, digging deeper into the topics that we talked about today. Or if there's other things that you're working on and you'd love to come together again, we'd be happy to organize it. AMA can connect you to spokespeople if outside voices are ever helpful. So I think you'll find that like 90 to 95% of the time, if you're talking to reporters or if you're at public meetings, the most effective voices are people like within your community or people who have stories about wanting to move into your community. But if you ever find it's helpful to have like a housing, an outside like housing expert who can be talking about like the state of the Massachusetts housing market or what this means for the state overall, AMA can connect you to that. And they can also connect you to people in other communities who are doing similar work. So if you would want an elected official in another place, like somebody from Lexington, if that like made sense for you to say, here's what we did, it wasn't scary, like it's been a good thing, they can do that. And then finally, we on the Denterlein team would be happy to hop on the phone with anybody for 30 minutes to advise either on your overall communications work for your campaign, or if you have something specific that you would want to chat with us about, feel free to consider us a resource. So with that, we will stop presenting, and then we will